Okay, so we can start now, right? Okay, so yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Wei-Qiang Chen. I come from the Institute of Urban Environment, Chinese Academy of Sciences. So today, with the support of the IOP Publishing Group, so we are having this online session on sustainable development via low carbon transition. So today we are going to have 5 speakers. Professor Hongbo Duan from University of Chinese Academy of Sciences, Professor Zengkai Zhang from Xiamen University, Professor Ranran Wang from Leiden University, Dr. Takuma Watari from the National Institute for Environmental Studies in Japan, and Professor Zhi Cao from Nankai University. And I'm co-chairing this session with Dr. Lulu Song, who is my colleague at the IUE Institute of Urban Environment, Chinese Academy of Sciences. I will introduce Professor Hongbo Duan first, and then he can give a talk. For the rest of the speakers, we have Professor Lulu Song as the moderator. So first, I'd love to introduce Professor Hongbo Duan from University of Chinese Academy of Sciences. He is now a professor at the School of Economics and Management at the University of Cass. And he was also a visiting professor at two important universities in the United States, at the Department of Economics, University of Kansas, and also University of Tulsa. Professor Duan got his PhD degree also from the Chinese Academy of Sciences, but from the Institute of Policy and Management. His research interests focus on environmental and resource economics, energy sustainability, and climate change policy. He is the leading developer of the famous 3E integrated model, E3 metal and CE3 metal. He has published more than 100 peer-reviewed papers in scientific journals, including the Science Nature series. I know him pretty well, and he is a very important and a very good scientist in China. And we are honored to have him today. And he's going to give a talk on China's adaptive response to climate change through air conditioning. So Professor Duan, welcome and please, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So everything right for my PPT, my slides.
It seems that it's loud enough. It seems the not. Okay, it works.
Working, right? Okay, great. Okay, thank you, Wei-Qiang, for inviting me to join this very interesting, important session. And I'm going to present actually a recent work on the adaptation topic, and I will present the content in terms of the this outline. First, we get everybody knows the situation of global warming, and this is actually a dynamic. This dynamic figure shows the change of temperature from 1880 to 2032, and we can find that actually the temperature. This is basically the temperature in the 8 years. The recent 8 years is the most how to say is warmest years for the past maybe 100 years, and the average temperature has increased about 1.1 degrees Celsius in how to say compared to the pre-industry levels. And this year, I mean 2023, we encountered the hottest summer, and if this warming effect is included, and we may some institute expect that maybe we have the global warming may have reached around 1.5, but it is just some point. I think not a final estimate result. And this is the temperature in China. We can see that the green line shows the average temperature between the past 20 years, and the red one shows the annual temperature from 1961 to 2021. We can see that the temperature, we can observe a significant increase trace for the temperature, despite sometimes fluctuated a little bit. And this average summer temperature in 2022 reached about actually the highest value since 1961, and the average temperature is about 22, it's over 22 degree. And this figure shows the extreme weather situation. For the red point, or the red dot, shows the station, the weather station that hit the extreme temperature, and the red dot for the left one, and for the red one in the right side of the figure shows the weather station that hit the historical record in 2022. So 158 weather stations reached the extreme event standard, and 449 weather stations reached historical extreme values for these 2 years, I mean 2022 to 2023. And we also, why we need to cope with climate change, because it will bring damages to our society, including like health, and also some damages on ecological system, and also social economy system. And lots of researchers discuss the negative impact on health, and and also labor and the capital productivity. And there are two ways to cope with climate change. First is mitigation, and another one is adaptation. Actually, there are lots of paper on mitigations. So, and compared to that, a few of them are on the role of adaptation. So that's why this paper focus on this topic. And when we talk about the adaptation, a direct factor is how to adapt extreme heat. We may use air conditioners, and for both households and also companies. So this is this main content we're going to catch the role of air conditioning in response to climate change. And there are two ways to consider the impact of air conditioning. The first is intensive emerging, and another one is extensive emerging. Extensive emerging actually means we use more air air conditioner plants like air conditioners. That means more is intensive use. We use we use it for a long time. Yeah, and several papers on this topic on this topic, and like for example, they found that when the temperature get higher, more electricity will be used, especially when the temperature higher than 32 degrees. And there are few papers discuss the role of air conditioning in terms of extensive margin. And the extensive margin is air conditioner adoption. For example, some households don't have this appliance, but when the temperature get higher and higher, they are going to buy air conditioners to cope with the global warming. And we found maybe about 2 papers once considered the extensive margin effect, and they are focused on like developed countries use annual data, right? Annual survey data. So from the interval review, we may know that it is interesting to consider some developing countries like China, the role of air conditioning, the relationship between air conditioning and global warming, especially consider both intensive margin and extensive margin. And we will also examine the effect of conditioning from more macro data, like weekly sales data of air conditioners. This slide shows our data source. I think you guys may be familiar with climate data, so we only give a brief introduction about the air conditioner data. Actually, it is covered like more than 340 cities, and it is weekly sales data from 2008 to 2019, covering 30 provinces of mainland China. And we cut the temperature into different bins, below 10 degrees and above 30 degrees, every 5 degrees for a bin. And we also match the income data per capita in 295 cities. So this figure shows the distribution of weather stations and also conditioner sales. And the background color shows the adoption of air conditioners in different cities. And the yellow dot shows the weather stations, the distribution of weather stations, like maybe around 800, more than 800 stations. And the cities, we found some cities like Chongqing, Beijing, Shanghai, Xi'an, Chengdu, and Guangzhou maybe make the highest air conditioner sales. And it's easy to find that the color are much darker in the south than in the north. That is, the higher temperature corresponds to more sales of air conditioners. So this is how to fit with our observations. This is our main regression model, the dependent variable log4 of AC sales, and we consider the non-linear effect of temperature in terms of temperature bins, and we also consider other control variables like relative humidity and also rainfall, and also other closely related variables. We also consider the fixed effect from different levels like province year, weekly year, and the city level. And let's have a look at our main results. The first is that we found a unshaped, U-shaped, relationship between AC sales and temperature, as shown in the left figure, and we can see that. And the the shadow, the color, the shadow shows the 90%, 95% confidential interval, and we can see that if the for an extra day over extra day in 25 and 30 degree bin, when it correspond to or associated with a 9% weekly sales increase of weekly sales, and each additional day about 30 degree correspond to 60% increase of weekly AC sales. We also explored heterogeneous roles of some related factors like geographic location, like income and household size, and some other factors. This figure shows the role of geographic location. We consider this factor in terms of south cities and north cities, and we can see a more sensitive role of AC adaptation response to temperature, as shown the gray, the black line and the gray shadow in the picture. That means it's straightforward that for the south cities, the average temperature is much higher than the northern cities. So we need more AC adaptations to tackle the climate change, and also for the north cities, especially for the winter, they got a central heating system. Then they don't need AC air conditioning appliance to get warmer. We also find some interesting results if we consider the different roles of a different impact of air conditioning in terms of household size. We found that for a bigger house, if a family got a much bigger household size, it will be more sensitivity to the climate change or to higher temperature. This can be clearly observed in this picture, right? And we found that the difference between the two lines are much significant if the temperature is higher than 30 degrees or below 10 degrees. That means if for a larger household, that means they got more children or elderly people, and those people are more sensitive to climate change or to extreme weather. So they may need more ACs to adapt global warming. And we also explore the role of income and AC properties, because we get actually around 10 properties for each AC. And this table, it's easy to find that for the household that the income is below the average level, for those households, they will get a more significant response to climate change. But because the richer household may already got buy or purchase ACs, therefore the poor households or families, they may become new adopters for ACs once the temperature is getting higher and higher. And we also examine the role of heat waves. Okay, we measure heat wave in terms of the days that over some threshold temperature threshold like 32 degrees. and also consider the time lag effect of temperature. Then for the main results, we also made some robust check by subject to the temperature bins by CDD and HDD, and also changes the fixed effect, and consider the data cutoff, and also cluster province, and all the checks tells that our basic estimate is robust. And the last part is to make some projections that is based on a historical estimate between climate and adaptation to forecast the future relationship. And before we show the main results, we have to give the climate prediction date, and we detect the period is 20, because we are going to make a mid-term projections. So the target period is from 2040 to 2060. And the climate data is from coupled model intercomparison project phase 6, and called CMIP6. And to couple with the uncertainty of the model uncertainties, we choose 6 climate models to get the temperature projections. And we also, based on the baseline estimates, and we replace the number of each city's temperature been during the past 10 years, and also the per capita income under the typical SSPS scenarios. And we choose 3 SSPS, like SSP1, SSP2, and SSP5. And we also use the national growth rate of China's per capita GDP from SSP scenarios, and assume that the other cities get the same growth rate. If we have to calculate the AC associated power or electricity, we have to also get the annual hours of AC use. So this slide shows how we decide how long AC will be used, and then we assume that the temperature, the AC will depend on if the temperature is higher than 25 degrees or below 10 degrees. And for the below 10 degree situation, we assume that only for the southern cities, because for northern cities they got central heating systems, they don't need to use ACs for heating. And we need a last step if we want to make power demand projection. That means we have to determine the per capita power consumptions of conditioned use now and in the future. And we also we have to estimate the current AC holdings based on the annual sales and the initial holdings. And we also assume a 5% AC obsolescence rate, and this is the like a constant. This is not a time varying rate. Here we show the temperature changes in terms of different SSP scenarios, and we can observe a clear increase in days in the high temperature bins like 25 to 30 degree bin, and higher than 30 degree temperature bin. This is consistent across all scenarios, and especially we can find that the average temperature under the SSP5 scenarios, that the temperature, annual temperature is about 25, and for the mid-century, this number increased to 32 degree. And we should by in terms of summer and winter, we can find that as the temperature rise income grows, the future demand for air conditioning in summer will increase in most of all cities, and especially for under the non-sustainable scenario SSP5, and in southern cities, AC sales may increase more. We also consider the hours per AC and also the electricity demand for specific cities, And most cities would consume more electricity than the current level, especially for hot places like Chengdu, Nanchang, Hefei. And also we can observe diversity in air conditioning power consumption across cities. And averagely speaking, AC will surge. The AC associated power will surge by about 28%, and the SSB5 scenario. And the last slide shows the uncertainty of different climate models on the estimated results. Okay, let's conclude. We found a significant U-shaped relationship between temperature and AC adoption, and also examine the heterogeneous role of different key factors like geographical location, household income level, and also find a pronounced increase of air conditioning adoption with global warming. On average, the power consumption demand for air conditioning will surge by about 2.28% and the SSB5 scenario. And we'll give some policy insights from the energy efficient standards and the differential subsidies for purchasing such air conditioners, and also some building standards, because good building standards are good buildings, green buildings technologies can significantly reduce the using of air conditioners. So I think this is all the contents of my my presentation. Thanks all.
Many thanks to Professor Duan for this good talk. Any questions from the audience or from our other speakers? So Hongbo, thank you for the talk. I have a question for you. We are collecting also data from multi-cities on the stocks of the household stocks of different cities. But we are trying to use those data for analyzing the material stocks and flows, and also the end-of-life metals. I wonder, so in doing the studies, so we only had the data on the the average ownership, but for energy consumption, we found that, well, different air conditioners, they actually are quite different. Air conditioners, they are very big, some are just small. And also, if you have different brands and then different kinds of air conditioners, they have different energy efficiencies and also different materials used. So I wonder whether you take into account these kind of differences and how you actually can deal with the issues, relevant to the differences among air conditioners.
Yeah, this is actually a good question. We have many attributes for each air conditioners, but we don't have matched income data for people who purchase this air conditioner. So we only have the price and the other attributes. So currently we didn't to do such analysis, but I think it's a challenge for the current data. Only maybe half cities or half, maybe 1/3 of the cities got detailed information for the. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, well, I think there's still a lot of work we can do together, right? And very interesting.
Okay. So if no question, I think time is up for me, right?
Yeah, well, thank you so much again, and yeah.
Thank you for having me. Okay, thank you all.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, so Lulu, you can now moderate the second talk from now. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, let's move on. Our first speaker is Professor Zhang Zengkai. Professor Zhang is from the College of Environmental and Ecology at Xiamen University. His work is centered around climate change mitigation and adaptation. Other research interests include global value chain, marine economics, and sustainable development. His studies were published in some topic field journals such as Nature Climate Change, Nature Communications, and One Earth. He was awarded Young Talents of the Ministry of Environmental Protection, the Best PhD Thesis Award of Shanxi Province in China, the first prize of the University Scientific and Technology Achievements Award in Shanxi Province in China. So today he will talk about the value chain and carbon footprints of Chinese listed companies. Okay, let's welcome Professor Zhang.
Hello. Hello. Thank you, Lulu. Can you hear me?
Yeah, clearly.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Zengkai from Xiamen University. It's my pleasure to be here to talk about my research. And climate change mitigation and adaptation is really is a research house topic. Professor Duan just gave us a great presentation on climate change adaptation. And my presentation is related to climate change mitigation. And the topic of my research is value chain carbon footprints of Chinese listed companies. And there are three take-home messages in my presentation. The first one is the input-output life cycle assessment is an optional approach for the evaluation of enterprise value chain carbon footprints, which is also named the Scope 3 carbon footprints. And the second is the input-output model based on output decomposition can be better allegiant with the greenhouse gas protocol compared with the traditional demand-driven input-output model. And the third, double counting, which could not serve as a justification for adopting the traditional demand-driven input-output model, and which is an inherent characteristic of the enterprise Scope 3 carbon footprint. Okay. My talk will be in three parts. The first part, I will begin with the background and the motivation. Due to the fossil fuel composition, the greenhouse gas concentration in the atmosphere increased significantly, which results in the global climate change. To mitigate climate change, China has proposed the dual carbon goals. China would reach its carbon emission peak in 2030 and carbon neutrality in 2060. As an important mitigation actor of the enterprises face an increasing pressure to disclose and to measure and disclose their carbon footprints. And here is the U.S. Security and Exchange Commission proposed an extensive climate-related disclosure regime, which requires that all public companies should disclose their climate information, and all companies should disclose their Scope 1 and Scope 2 carbon footprints. And by 2025, the large companies they should measure and disclose their Scope 3 carbon footprint. And even though right now in China, public companies they only need to measure and disclose their Scope 1 and Scope 2 carbon footprint, but we think that it's a global trend that we should measure and measure both the upstream and the downstream global value chain carbon footprint. And the Scope 1 carbon footprint, which means the emission just associated with the production activities of firms. And the Scope 2 carbon footprints is the emissions related to the electricity the boat electricity, and the scope 3 carbon footprint is the emissions embodied in the value chain, is embodied in the upstream value chain and the downstream value chain. It's the emission emitted by the upstream supplier and the emissions associated with the downstream users. And there are some problems to measure the scope 3 carbon footprint. The first one is the data limitation. If we measure the scope 3 carbon footprints, we need the information of the emission information of our upstream supplier and downstream users. However, usually we will find that it's difficult for us to find the data to measure these emissions. And the second, according to the GHG protocol, enterprises, they can choose which categories of the scope 3 carbon footprints to report. There are 15 different categories. For each company, they can choose by themselves. So the results of different companies, we cannot compare them directly. So even though there are some platforms that we can report and report their carbon footprints. For example, the Carbon Disclosure Project, which is the world's largest environmental information platform, which encourage firms to report and disclose their carbon footprints. However, we can find that in 2022, all the companies, Chinese companies, which reported environmental information in the CDP, only 75% of these companies reported their scope 1 emissions, and 58% of the companies reported their scope 2 emissions, and the rate of scope 3 is even lower, only 16%. And in 2021, only 82 listed companies in China which provided a comprehensive report on climate change. So the disclosure rate is significantly lower for the emerging countries such as China. So is there any other method to measure their carbon footprints? The most widely used method is the process-based LC life cycle assessment method. But due to the problem that it's difficult to collect the data, the disclosure rate is really low. The IPCC also recommend another method, which is the top-down method, based on the environmental input-output life cycle LC. And here in this study, we turn to the input-output LC method. This method has the advantage of a complete system boundary and comparable accounting results, and it's more convenient and practical for large-scale use. If we use the process-based LC, we can analyze each firm, but it's difficult for us to collect the data for too many companies. For example, in our studies, there are 2,000 enterprises. It's difficult for us to collect all the supply chain data of these companies. And there are also some databases. They also use the environmental input-output LC. For example, the Tucows database, which calculates the scope 3 carbon footprint based on the EIO-LCO method, which report more than 15,000 companies. And however, most of the databases, they use the traditional Liang-Tifu demand-driven L model. We all know that the output of our company, may not only be used to satisfy the final demand. Most part of the output may be delivered to be further processed by other business. We call it the intermediate demand. So if we just use the traditional demand-driven input-output model, there may be some over mistake or under mistake of the carbon footprint. So here we recommend that we should tend to use another method to trace the carbon footprint. And here we tend to move into the second part, the input and the output model. Here is the traditional Liang-Tifu input-output model. Here is the final demand matrix, and here is the Liang-Tifu inverse matrix, and the equation 1 can give us the result of the final output matrix. We can define the gross output matrix, and we define the E as the carbon intensity matrix, and then here we can get the equation 2, which represents the emission, which is driven by the final demand. Here is the traditional demand-driven input and output model. Here we make a decomposition. First is the final demand matrix. We divided it into two parts. The first part is the final demand, which is related to our studied sector, and the second part, which is not related to our studied sector, which here is the sector Y, which is represent the sector Y. Here is which is related to just this the second we can just call it the second sector, and the same as we can divide the intermediate input matrix into two parts. And the first part is related to the studied sector, the second sector, and the other part is which is not related to this sector. Then we can decompose the equation 2 into the three parts. Here is the equation 3. The first part is the emissions that is not related to the studied sector, and the second part is the emissions related to the output of the studied sector, which is used to satisfy the intermediate demand, and the third part, which is used the emissions related to the output, which is used to satisfy the final demand, and the sum of the second and the third part will be all the emissions related to the studied sector, and we can get the equation 4. We can know here is the intermediate demand, and here is the final demand. The sum of these two parts, which is just the gross output of the studied sector. And here is just the same, just similar as the Liang-Tifu inverse matrix, but different. We can see that here we do not trace the carbon emission from the final demand, but from the gross output. And we also give another method to trace the carbon footprint, which is called the hypothetical extraction method, which is called HEM. And here is the traditional Liang-Tifu inverse Liang-Tifu input-output model, and we can see its emission related to an economic system. And here we can see there is another economic system, but in this economic system, the studied sector is extracted, and the emissions are not related to the studied sector. Then the difference between these two parts will be the emission related to the studied sector. We can see that the result is just the same as the decomposition method, but the HEM method is more intuitive compared to the decomposition method. So we recommend that we can use the HEM method directly in the future. Based on this method, we first calculate the carbon emissions embodied in multinational enterprise. We can find that the emissions embodied in the foreign affiliates of the multinational enterprise reached about a fifth of the global carbon emissions. It's really big. Traditional, the lecture mainly focus on the carbon emission embodied in the international trade, which is an important channel of carbon transfer. But here we show that investment is another very important channel of carbon transfer. However, here we only evaluate the carbon emission embodied in the upstream value chains of multinational enterprises. How to extend the framework to the downstream value chain carbon footprints. Here is a challenge we faced. And another problem is that we want to analyze the carbon footprints of large multinational enterprises. However, we find that it's difficult. Our method cannot calculate the carbon footprints of an enterprise directly. We have to collect this data from the annual reports of these enterprises. For example, here we collect the carbon footprint data from the annual report of Sustainable Development Report of the Coca-Cola, and we compare it with our results. We are thinking how to downscale the framework of our framework to the enterprise level. Right now, our framework is still at the sector level, and we know that there are goals. Another model is the goals input input and output model. If we want to measure the downstream input carbon footprints, we need to use the Gaussian input and output model. Here we use another equation. We define we use the matrix of value added ratio matrix, and the B is the relative inverse matrix. And we multiply it by B, and here we can see it as which is attribution matrix. And because the column or the column sum of the sum of the column elements of which is equal to 1, then we can obtain we can get the equation phi. We can see that here is just the relative input output matrix, which is multiplied by the VB. However, VB is only an attribution matrix, which it has no result. It will not impact on the final result of the carbon emission. We can see that here in equation phi, here is the final demand. We can trace the upstream value chain, and here is also the value added matrix, and here we can trace the downstream carbon emissions. So based on this equation, we can move forward our framework, compare with our traditional framework. And here we use the HEM method directly. We do not use the decomposition method. And here is the traditional economic system, and here is the economic system which is not related to the studied sector, to the targeted sector I in region R. The difference between this part will be the emission related to the studied sector. And here is the scope 1 carbon footprint, the equation of the scope 1 carbon footprint, which is just the emission related to the output of this sector. And here is the scope 2 carbon footprint, which is the emission related to the electricity or heat used by this sector. And here is the emission intensity matrix of the electricity sector. And here is the upstream scope 3. Here is the scope 3 carbon footprints, and the downstream scope 3 carbon footprints. Then we can calculate the different part of this carbon footprint in one equation, and we also introduce the structural path analysis. We can decompose the relative inverse matrix into different part. Here is the we can observe it. It can be observed as the first supply chain tier, and the second supply chain tier, the third supply chain tier. Then we can see the distribution of the carbon footprint along the value chain. And another problem is how to downscale the research framework to the enterprise level. we find the annual report date, the annual report of the enterprise. They disclose their revenues by industry and by product or by region. Here is an annual report of a Chinese listed company, which is an electricity generation sector. Its revenue are made up of different parts. For example, the electricity generation and the coal mining, and the revenue are divided into different provinces. And our input output just is multi-regional, which includes 30 provinces, and there are 42 sectors. If we match their annual report date with our input output table, we can estimate their carbon footprint. We should know that here we estimated the carbon footprints of the enterprise based on the average carbon footprint intensity at the sector level. This is a characteristic of the top-down analysis framework. Okay, the third part is the results and the discussion. First, we calculate all the carbon emissions which are related to Chinese 2000 listed companies. We can find that the emissions, about 60% of the national emissions are related to the production activities of the Chinese listed companies. Their climate actions are essential to the achievement of the Chinese targets. And we also analyze the origin of the carbon emissions. Most of the emissions come from the electricity generation sector and the highway industry sector. And we also analyze we also rank the listed companies based on the volume of the upstream value chain carbon footprint and the downstream value chain carbon footprints. We find that the energy company, construction company, and the finance company, in traditional we think that the financial companies they have lower emissions, but here we find that they have a greater carbon footprint because here we measure their downstream value chain carbon footprint, because finance companies they invest their investment behaviors will result in a huge number of emissions. And we also measure the distribution of carbon emission along the value chains, and we divided the upstream value chains into five tiers. Here is the first tier supplier, the second tier supplier, the third tier supplier, and here is the first tier user. And the output may be further processed by the first user and further exported or further delivered to the downstream users. So there is a second value chain user and the third tiers. And we can see the distribution of the carbon footprint along the value chain. We can see here is there exist significant differences among the distribution of value chain carbon footprints along the value chain. For example, here the energy companies whose carbon footprint is mainly made up of the downstream value chain carbon footprint, and the construction company whose carbon footprint is mainly made up of the upstream value chain carbon footprints. And another problem is the diamond counting problems, and there's a problem we need to talk about in more details, because there are some problem with our frameworks. Because we in traditional we use the Leontief IO models. There is a good characteristics because there is no double counting problems. However, in our framework there are double counting because when we measure the value chain carbon footprint, we not only measure all the carbon emission of ourselves, but also the emissions of our supplier and our downstream users. We measure the carbon footprint, carbon emission of others. So there should be double countings. Double countings is a characteristic of the enterprise Scope 3 carbon footprints. The Greenhouse Gas Protocol also claims that when we measure the national carbon emissions at the national levels or at the regional levels, there should be no double counting problems. So because the sum of the regional emission or the national emissions should be the same as the global emissions. But when we analyze the risk management and at the firm levels, the double counting is less important. If we analyze the risk faced by the enterprise, we should think about their emissions embodied in the supplier and the downstream users. And the Greenhouse Gas Protocol corporate standards, which descend several guidelines to guidelines for how to report and how to disclose the carbon footprints of enterprise. They also noted that when we measure the Scope 1 and Scope 2 carbon footprint, which prevent the double counting, but when we measure the Scope 3 carbon footprint, the double counting is less important. Due to their standards, there is no word that there is a Scope 3 carbon footprint. There should be no double counting. So we said that double countings should not serve as a justification for adopting the traditional demand-driven input and output model. And here is another problem, so the double counting problem. Due to the double counting problem, we cannot add the carbon footprint of a company to that of another company, because if we make the sum of their carbon footprints, there will be our estimation of the gross carbon footprints. Here is an example. For example, there are asset managers. They invest their equity portfolio investment are made up of thousands or millions of enterprises. Even though there are an increasing number of enterprises, they are reporting their carbon footprints through the CDP platform or another platform. So we cannot add this carbon footprint directly, because there will be overestimation, the problem of overestimation. However, the method we propose here, we propose another framework, another way, another choice to estimate their carbon footprint. And here we estimate the top asset managers, the emissions associated with their equity portfolio investments. Okay, here is my presentation, and there are 3 take-home messages. First, the input-output life cycle assessment is an optional. It's only an optional. We should know that the most widely used method is still the process-based life cycle analysis method. It's only an optional approach for the evaluation of the Scope 3 carbon footprints. And the input-output model based on output decomposition can be better aligned with the Greenhouse Gas Protocol compared with the traditional demand-driven input-output model. And the double counting problem is an inherent characteristic of the Scope 3 carbon footprints. Okay, here is my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Professor Zhang's enlightening presentation. Here's a question from our audience. You can see in the Q&A section. Yeah, he asked, China's steel industry accounts for 15 to 16% of the country's carbon emissions, ranking first among all industrial sectors in the country. What are the new directions of industrial technology to be employed in order to reduce carbon emissions?
Pardon, I cannot find the question. Where is the question?
Live QA. In the bottom of
level QA. Level QA.
Yeah. The first one.
Wait. my question, China's steel industry accounted for China's carbon emission, ranking first among industry in the country. What are the new direction of industry technology to be in order to reduce carbon emission industry? Okay, I think this question is about the industry technology. Yeah, it's a good question, but I think there are maybe there are another studies can give you a good answers. But from my presentation or from my analysis, I think maybe reducing the carbon emission of the steel industry is not we should think about it from the whole value chains, but not only the emissions emitted by itself, but also the upstream emission. Upstream emission, for example, it will use a huge volume of electricity, and if we use the green electricity, I think we can reduce the carbon footprint of the steel industry. But which technology to reduce it? Maybe I cannot give you too much good answers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Professor Zhang again. Thanks for a fascinating story. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Okay, let's move on to our next presenter. Let's welcome Professor Wang Ranran. Professor Wang is from the Institute of Environmental Science and co-director of the WISE Center at Leiden University. Her research investigates the impact of macroeconomic activities like investments and international trade on the environment. She also works on integrating WISE accounts into global sustainability models, preliminary using economical, microeconomic modeling, and environmental engineering. Her research aims to inform policy decisions for sustainable well-being and an inclusive economy. Okay, let's welcome Professor Wang.
Thank you, Lulu, for the very kind and comprehensive introduction of me. And thank you everyone for tuning in. So today I'm going to delve into the topic of manufactured capital assets and the manufactured capital stock. Many would perceive that capital formation, capital stock, capital assets are merely financial concepts. Well, in our research, my collaborators and I want to emphasize that the development and the accumulation of manufactured capital plays a significant role in sustainable development. So in my presentation, I will try to explain why our perspective is not only valid, but also essential. So what is manufactured capital exactly? Manufactured capital has four main types of manufactured assets. And the most important one, as the AI got it right, are the structures, including both residential buildings and non-residential structures, such as infrastructures. While the manufactured capital also includes various types of machinery, transport equipment, and cultivated assets, such as livestock and orchards. Well, among all the very different types of manufactured assets, there are some very important common characteristics. They are all durable goods, meaning that they will be used for multiple years, decades, or even longer to support further production. And their formation are driven by investment year after year. Well, we probably would all agree that investment is important for the economy. And for the past 25 years or so, we see that each year we spend about a quarter of global GDP on investment so that we can keep growing the economy. However, proportionally, if you look at the importance or the role of investment leading up capital formation, producing of new manufactured assets, in driving up the environmental consequences, this is not even comparable. So every year in the past 2 decades or so, global investment, because of the production of manufactured assets, have driven up more CO2 emissions and greenhouse gas emissions than its contribution in GDP. This impact is even more significant when we look at the extractions of various materials. It ranges from 50% to as high as over 70% of all material extractions every year globally. And because of all those activities, there are also significant human health losses caused by the continuing development of capital, manufactured capital driven by investment. Well, I think that those estimates already have shown to you the significant environmental and resource material implications of capital formation. But it's really important to note that everything you see here are based on annual snapshots of investment and its consequences. So they are all flow-based accounts. In another word, so far we're only showing you an incomplete image of the role of capital formation, capital accumulation for sustainability, and then its implications for the environment. If you think about it, the role of manufactured capital is actually the one that we accumulated over years, driven by investment through capital formation that in the end support our current and potentially future production and consumption. So the stock-based concept plays a very important role in this research question. While there has been models, for instance, those macro environmental economic accounting and modeling framework that actually are well positioned to link the investment flows, capital formation, then the accumulated stock, production, consumption, and all those environmental and sustainability challenges. However, if you dig into those models, more often than not, or most of the time, the stock accounts are missing. So in our model development, we actually focused on developing the stock accounts in this macro environmental economic modeling framework. Then we paid extra attention to compile and harmonize time series of capital investment data, as well as empirical information on how capital assets are discarded or retired in the physical form. We intentionally broke away from the conventional economic accounting for capital stock, where you measure the outflow of capital stock as economic depreciation, so that you don't really capture the physical disappearance or the physical existence of the capital at any given time. And with this new model development, we're able to rather consistently connect the flows of capital, of investment, and all those environmental and resource materials inputs into the current capital stock level across countries in the world. And in order to measure or quantify those historical environmental costs, such as material demand, greenhouse gas emissions, and human health impacts that all the investment over the years took, and in the end realized into the capital stock we are relying on today, we introduced this new capital or this new stock-based metric called the legacy environmental footprint. And in order to quantify the LEF, we included the investment, global economic production, and then the environmental accounts from the year 1970 to 2019, so a 50-year lifespan. And in our model, we covered 49 countries or regions in the world, and in each economy, we have 200 sectors. And given the data availability for the asset data, we cover 4 to 10 asset types. And here you can see the results shown as the pyramid. This is because we see the resemblance between population stock and the capital stock. So here you can grab a rather comprehensive overview of the dynamics of the capital development between those in the developed world and those in the developing world. While at the same time, you see the dynamics along time. So if you look at those figures, for instance, if we focus on the greenhouse gas emissions, our results suggest that between 1970 and 2019, the build-up of the capital stock we're enjoying now actually caused 250 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. So what does that mean? If we put it into context, that's about 5 times of CO2 emissions or CO2 emission equivalent that we generated in the year 2020. We could also compare that with the global carbon budget from now to 2100 for the 1.5 degree climate goals. That is about 300 to 400 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. And also through these pyramids, you could see that, or you can not miss that there is a significant transition of capital formation and capital stock development from global north, the developed economies, to the global south, the less developed economies, especially in the recent years. And actually, we found out that just in the past 25 years, since 1995, the global LEF actually more than tripled in terms of the iron ore extractions and more than doubled in terms of copper ore extraction, non-metallic minerals extraction, greenhouse gas emissions, and human health impacts. And of course, here you see much of the growth can be attributable to the fast development of China. Well, if we look at the results on the per capita level, we see that there's either a very stubborn remaining gap between the global north and the global south, or the gap for some of the indicators even has grown over the years, with China as the exception. But even we take the average of the less developed economies here, LDEs, and the average of the developed economies, Ds, we see that by 2019, the gap the developed economies on average is still 70% to 530% higher than the average levels of less developed economies across the various LEF metrics. And despite of China's fast growth, except for iron ore extraction, the per capita level is still lower than the developed economy average. And we found that this inequality is not only shown through the levels of per capita LEFs, but in terms of the origins of the impact, the materials, and the emissions. And this is especially significant if you look at the extractions of iron and copper ores and the human health impact. Globally, more than 50% of that in capital formation in the capital stock is generated overseas. So different from where the capital stock actually was located. And this contrast is even much more if you look at the origins of the emissions, the materials, and the human health impacts of the capital stock accumulation in the developed economies. For the metal ores and for the human health impacts, this percentage, the overseas impacts, are as high as 70%. So what does it mean? If we think about the challenges faced by the global capital development in the future, one no-brainer is that knowing the lower capital development level, the service level, now in developing countries, they will have to face significant challenges in building up the capital stock, entailing lots of environmental implications. But these results here also highlight, because of those countries' positions on the international supply chains as raw material extractions for the refinery services, they face additional challenges in the future. Also relevant for thinking about or anticipating mitigating the environmental sustainability challenges for global capital development in the future, we found that globally, if we look at the efficiencies of how industries, how different regions are producing and using capital assets, the variations are quite significant. So on the brighter side, we could suggest that if we look better into the best practices in the different industries and countries in producing the assets and in matching and using the assets, we could have already relieved a lot of the pressures in future capital development. And another perspective is from the sufficiency level. So apparently, currently, if we compare the averages of the less developed economies and the developed economies, there's a huge capital provision gaps represented here by the CO2 emissions that are caused to build up the capital stock. And if we look into the future, when the developing economies catch up in filling the gap for housing, for public administration, for health, then there would be also challenges in meeting the carbon budget and also other resources constraints. In addition, we find that if we look at what the high development level in the future entail, based on what we saw in the past, even for countries that have all achieved in pretty high human development level, here measured by HDI, there is quite some variations between how much greenhouse gas emissions or the materials per capita that are needed to achieve the high capital level. So again, focus on the best practices that to produce the capital assets and at the same time to match production and the capital needs, and also think about the balance and the trade-off in the sufficiency aspect, and also paying attention to the capital assets development that better fit the well-being needs would be the important messages for future capital development. And then another aspect we want to highlight here is for the future capital development analysis, it is really important to look at various environmental aspects. So here, if we use Australia as an example, as a country with high human development level, it actually did very good from the perspective of non-metallic minerals used to build up their capital stock on the per capita basis. However, you see a very different story that Australia actually performed or required most CO2 emissions or greenhouse gas emissions in achieving high human development level because of capital development. So we know that just inevitably nations and even globally to continue the economic growth is still on the popular agenda. So it's only natural to assume that capital development is going to continue. And there will be challenges due to the material needed to build up the capital stock, the emissions generated, and then the human health consequences. So a student of mine, in her recent work, the messages she presented really re-emphasized future work to develop better capital stock development models and scenarios to make sure that we understand and also use the connections between capital services, well-being, production, and materials. So we see that if we just follow the current development model, then we build up capital level very high to all the countries to achieve high development level, then we would have to emit another 1,200 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. So just to remind you, the carbon budget for 1.5 degree from now to 2100 is merely 300 to 400 gigatons. So we would have far exceeded that part. Well, we also explored a few sufficiency and efficiency measures, and you can see that only if we combine the sufficiency, the ambitious sufficiency and efficiency measures, we can develop capital stock within any possible sustainable development pathways. So with that, I want to wrap up my presentation and look forward to your questions.
Okay, thanks, Professor Wang, and thanks for your enlightening presentation. So we still have 10 minutes for a Q&A session, and our audience, please type your questions if you have any in the Q&A box. So Professor Wang, I have a question regarding the model's 50-year time horizon. To what extent do the outcome vary with changes in the time frame?
So first, we would love to have a longer time series for this capital stock studies. The best we can get in order to have a relatively reasonable global coverage was from 1970. Then what are the consequences? If you think about the different types of the capital stock, those that were built before 1970 and are still up and functioning today are mainly buildings. And knowing the development pattern, most of the old buildings are in the developed world. So putting everything together in the LEF accounts, we would underestimate the LEFs for the developed economies. And if you think about, buildings in terms of its environmental implications, one of the important aspects is the non-metallic minerals, but also, greenhouse gas emissions and metals are also important there. And I also want to take this opportunity to highlight the data gaps. It's not only for countries, but also, for instance, I highlighted the importance of capture the capital dynamics, especially the outflows. There hasn't been, good empirical information on the life cycle, especially the end of life of different capital assets with comprehensive, industry assets, time build, global scopes. There's very little data on that. We have to rely on the limited empirical information, mainly are the surveyed results from certain countries in the industries and some of the existing modeled works. So I want to take also this question's opportunity to highlight the data gaps and some of the opportunities maybe for the audience to take on.
Okay. We can see that there are many studies that they are focused on the managed capital and their footprints, their environmental changes. And if we continue to do these studies with the manufactured capital, what do you think? What areas to be the focus of the future research hotspots?
There are so many. So for instance, if you look at where you refer to the slide I showed to you at the end of the presentation, those future explorations, because as far as I know, even we have lots of scenarios examining or looking for sustainable development pathways, while the definition of the capital stock is at best really blurred. Well, in our preliminary analysis, we already highlighted the significance of the problem. So for instance, if we don't take ambitious measures, then only by building capital stock alone, we would exceed any safe climate change budget, right? So I do think the modeling would be a start. But at the same time, we're doing the global study that already shed light on the variations of the efficiencies in producing assets, in using that, and also the provision of the capital services. I think that all cry for more detailed, systematic, or nuanced studies in the hotspot industries that I highlighted. For instance, provision would be mainly around housing, public administration, and medical support in developing countries. And for the industry level, globally, it would be construction, utilities, among others. So if we get better understanding of the best practices and how to implement them, then that would make a significant impact for the future challenges we would have to deal with.
Okay. Another question, could you elaborate on the distinct insights that the new stocks-based metric provides for sustainability decision-making when compared to the traditional flow-based environmental footprint metrics?
Sure. So I illustrated some in the slides already. Those future-based explorations wouldn't be valid without this stock-based understanding. However, at the same time, if you think, we only rely on the flow accounts, knowing that capital development of different countries, different industries are at different stage, of course, the flow-based accounts that you capture for the developed economies would look very different or significantly lower than those captured for the developing economies. So that's why I highlighted the flow-based understanding, where the accounts will give you some understanding, important understanding, but incomplete understanding. And then another topic that could be interesting is related with the regional emission responsibility discussion, because you might have heard about the different principles of sharing the carbon budget. Then you can base on the historical emissions or the capability approach based on GDP per capita. Well, if you think about the stock-based accounts, it can actually provide a good starting point, because knowing that capital stock really has a good measurement of the capability of the different countries to serve current and future generations. And then the LEF, the legacy environmental footprint, really capture how much CO2 emissions, greenhouse gas emissions should or would entail to build up the capital level. So I do think, among the different emission budget sharing principles, the stock-based one would play some additional useful insights.
Okay. Thanks, Professor Wang again, and welcome you back in China in our Xiamen.
Yeah,
next time.
Thank you so much. It's very nice of you.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to our next presenter. Okay, thanks you again. Okay, is that okay, Takuma?
Sorry for that.
Okay, let's move on. Our next speaker is Professor Takuma Watari. He's a tenure-track researcher at the National Institute for Environmental Studies in Japan, and a joint fellow at the University of Technology, Sydney, Australia. Previously, he worked at the University of Cambridge. His primary research interests include industrial decarbonization, sustainable supply of critical materials, and international equality in material use. His work combines traditional engineering principles with system analysis, and he has been published in leading scientific journals. He completed his PhD at the University of Tokyo in 2021, where he won the Dean's Award and was the first student in the department to complete the PhD program within a 2-year time frame. So he will talk about the limit quantity and quality of steel supply in a zero-emission future tonight. Okay, as well, Takuma's present.
Cool. Thank you for the introduction, Lulu, and sorry for the some trouble about the screen sharing, but I hope you can see my screen now and hear me well. So yeah, I'm going to spend the next 15 or 20 minutes to explain about a little bit about the feasible supply of steel and cement within a Paris-compliant carbon budget. So I'm trying to just sort of provide some context about what the climate target actually means for future materials production, manufacturing, and construction. Okay, so if we move to the next slide. So to provide some context, this figure shows the global greenhouse gas emissions from materials production over the past 20 years, from 1995 to 2015, where we can see that the greenhouse gas emissions have more than doubled during this time period. And more importantly, the contribution of materials production to total emissions has increased over the years as well, with materials production now accounting for around 25% of total emissions. So around a quarter of all greenhouse gas emissions now come from the materials we produce. And looking at which materials is responsible for such large greenhouse gas emissions, then we can see that steel and cement are the largest emitters, accounting for more than half of the total materials-related emissions. So I think clearly the climate change mitigation is largely dependent on how we can decarbonize these high-emitting materials production sector within a limited time frame, and that's the sort of focus of today's talk. So if we move to the next slide, we see when it comes to industrial decarbonization, mostly existing energy system models or decarbonization scenarios have usually emphasized the rapid and large-scale deployment of supply-side technologies. For example, so this is the case of a energy technology perspective report by the International Energy Agency, IEA. So they expect that on average about half of 2050 emission reductions for the steel and cement sector will come from the carbon capture, utilization and storage, or CCUS. And this trend is also reflected in the academic literature on steel, cement, or the entire industrial sector, where a significant part of the emission reduction is expected to come from CCUS. So next slide, please. So in addition to the CCUS, actually emerging body of literature focuses more on hydrogen-based solutions, particularly direct reduced iron using green hydrogen. So what this technology is trying to do is to reduce the iron oxide ore using hydrogen instead of coke. And the idea is that if we use hydrogen to remove the oxygen from the iron ore, then all that comes out is water, not CO2. So that this is a kind of basic idea. And we have quite a lot of research in this space. And so a recent study indicates that hydrogen-based steel can be economically competitive when combined with high-quality iron ore and also abundant and cost-effective renewable electricity. So if we move to the next slide, I think, however, important point that has been, I think, largely overlooked is that the both CCUS or hydrogen-based solutions share a common challenge, which is the indispensability of infrastructure. So as you may know, these decarbonization strategies essentially rely on large-scale build-out of infrastructure, right, including for CO2 transport, CO2 storage, renewable electricity production, or green hydrogen supply. But the problem is our progress is still quite slow. So when looking at the left side of the figure about the IEA projections about carbon capture and storage, for example, we see that the 2010 IEA report assumes that the CO2 capture for the steel and cement sector would reach roughly 200 megatons CO2 in 2021. But because our progress is too slow, they have adjusted their projections over time. So we have a clear downward trend in the left side of the figure. And we currently have almost negligible amount of CO2 capture and storage capacity in the steel and cement sector, less than 1 megaton CO2. But if you look at the 2050 data, then we can see that the IEA almost constantly achieves about roughly 2,000 megatons CO2 to just decarbonize global steel and cement production. And that's great, obviously, if we could achieve that scenario within 27, 26 years' time. But the deployment is highly uncertain given the history of failures and the scale of the challenges we have to face. So that's the case of the CCUS or carbon capture and storage. In the case of zero-emission electricity supply, as another example in the bottom side of the figure, then what we can say is it has been much more successful compared to the CCUS, but despite the substantial expansion of zero-emission electricity in the last several years, it still falls short of the annual increase needed to meet the most ambitious scenarios. So still contains a bit of uncertainty. So if we move to the next slide, so this is the kind of research question that I'm trying to answer. I think this is quite simple. How much steel and cement can we supply within the carbon budget? So that's the kind of research question I'm trying to answer. So I'm trying to estimate the feasible supply level of steel and cement within a carbon budget, and trying to sort of better understand what our climate targets actually means for future materials production, construction, and manufacturing. So in the next slide, I'm going to just briefly explain the methodology, but we built a model called the material budget models that combines optimization routines and a set of mass balancing equations to do so. So what this model do is that the model derives the feasible material supply within the carbon budget by treating material flows as endogenous variables in the optimization routine rather than the exogenous variables. So this is the kind of opposite of the general energy system models, which uses future materials demand as an exogenous variables to explore supply configurations that meet the given demand. So what we are trying to do here is something like forecasting supply and then backcasting demand, rather than the forecasting demand and the backcasting supply. So in the next slide, I'm going to just briefly explain the conceptual diagram. Could you move forward? Yeah, thank you. This is the kind of schematic diagram showing the approach that I'm using now. So I think this approach is quite useful because the existing energy system models do not give a clear signal to the stakeholders to implement immediate demand side actions. So as you can see, so if you could click the button, then I think some text can pop up in the slide, demand and supply. But yeah, anyway. So as you can see, most modeling studies have first forecasted materials and energy demand, and then sort of backcasted the structure of supply side technologies to meet the demand. And this approach inevitably, because of the modeling structure, leads to a heavy reliance on accelerated infrastructure deployment and focuses on the less sort of demand side actions because of the modeling structure, because we already assumed that the demand will grow into the future, and think about how to supply within the carbon constraints, right? But instead, the idea of this approach is that we can balance the necessity of supply side and demand side actions by first better understanding the feasible supply and then thinking about how to use it on the demand side. So yeah, this is the kind of basic idea of this work. The potential range of infrastructure deployment is determined by the IEA scenario database and also more conservative assumptions based on the actual construction plan. So how much sort of technology deployment we will possibly have according to the construction plan we have at the moment. So yeah, that's the kind of basic assumptions. And if we move to the next slide, so yeah, that was quite a brief explanation of what I did. But through this analysis, I think we have identified 3 key challenges in decarbonizing the steel and cement industries, which include limited feasible supply, low quality recycling, and international inequality. So the first challenge is limited feasible supply. Could you move to the slide? I think, yeah, thank you. So this slide shows the estimated global feasible supply of steel and cement within a 1.5-degree carbon budget compared to the several existing demand scenarios. So each dot indicates a existing demand scenarios, and the line indicates the estimated global feasible supply estimated in this study. So what we can see here is that despite technological advances within the materials industry, the feasible supply of steel and cement is likely to fall short of the expected demand. So according to the medium of the scenarios, but the feasible supply levels corresponds to about 60% for steel and roughly 40% for cement, relative to the 2050 expected baseline demand. So we have a supply and demand gap there. And even if modest demand reduction strategies are materialized as outlined in the IEA net zero scenario, the level of feasible supply still does not match the expected demand, as you can see. And the only major existing scenario in which the expected demand could be fully met by the feasible supply is the low energy demand scenario, which outlines the most ambitious demand reduction measures. Next slide, please. And actually, this trend holds true even with the well below 2-degree carbon budget. So this is the case of well below 2-degree carbon budget. So what we can say is the feasible supply is likely to fall short of the expected baseline demand, although, as you can see, the modest demand reduction scenarios fall within the interquartile range of the feasible supply. So the supply and demand gap is kind of narrower than the 1.5-degree carbon budget case, but still we have a bit of a supply and demand gap when we compare the expected baseline demand with the estimated feasible supply. So I guess the key takeaway is that the continued production growth is unlikely within the limited carbon budget unless we build out essential infrastructure at an unprecedented scale within a limited time frame. If we move to the next slide. So what this means is that we will have to use less materials to deliver the same level of services, right? For example, according to the medium of the scenarios, the feasible supply of steel and cement may only meet roughly 40% of the expected demand for construction and 60% for manufacturing. This perspective is, I think, crucial because the construction or manufacturing industries are largely unaware that the supply is likely to fall short of the expected demand. So, and they're prepared for the future. I think our supply sort of focus scenarios provide a bit more competing evidence of the urgency of the demand side actions and sort of establish a benchmarks for the required level of resource efficiency or material efficiency, providing the same level of services with less materials. So that was the case of the limited feasible supply. If we move to the next slide, I'm going to just explain about the second challenge, which is the low quality recycling. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this slide shows the different steel production processes within the carbon budget. And what we can say here is that so the ore-based production shown in the panels A, B, and C are more sensitive to the infrastructure deployment compared to the recycling-based production shown in panel D. So obviously these trends are not the prediction of the future, but I think they indicate the varying degree of the vulnerability of each production route to the uncertain infrastructure deployment. So the ore-based production is more sensitive to the level of infrastructure. So how much carbon we can store in the ground or how much electricity we can have. But the recycling-based production is more certain to grow compared to the the production from iron ore. And if we move to the next slide, so what this means is actually that we will be more dependent on recycling for our future supply. And I think this is where low quality recycling becomes a serious issue. So this is a bit of a complex figure, but this is a Sankey diagram showing the global steel flow in 2020, where we can see how we produce steel and how we manufacture it and use it in the global economy. So yeah, obviously this is quite complex, but I think important point here is that almost all of the recycled steel is processed into rebar and other products used in the construction industry. So quite limited flow from recycling to the materials and used in the automotive industry or machinery industry. So this downcycling practice is used mainly because Trump elements, and mainly copper, mixed in scrap, are difficult to remove in the current steelmaking processes. And when we have increased level of Trump elements in steel, then we have quite lots of issues, like increased susceptibility to cracking at high temperatures, steel quality degradation, and sometimes strain aging when we have quite a lot of nitrogen in the steel, which makes it challenging to produce high-grade steel through this recycling route. So I guess important challenge we have to face is how to produce high-grade materials such as those used in the automotive industry from recycled materials. So that was the second challenge, low quality recycling. So next slide, please. The last challenge is international inequality. Yeah, thank you. Oh, no, yeah, next slide is fine. Yeah, so I think given the potential supply shortfall, important question to be answered is whether it is actually possible to satisfy the basic needs of the growing world population with a feasible supply of steel and cement. Because if we have limited supply, then whether it's actually possible to satisfy the basic needs across the global population, right? So to answer this question, we extract data on the minimum material requirements for satisfying basic human needs based on the empirical study analyzing the relationship between the global EU-use material stocks and the 5 essential services in this case, including electricity, water, sanitation, shelter, and mobility. So these colored 3 bars show the minimum requirements by services, regions, and income levels. And these 2 bars on the left side of figure shows the estimated feasible supply from 2021 to 2050. So this is the cumulative number. But what we found is that theoretically, the basic needs of the growing world population could well be met by the feasible supply, even if the infrastructure is deployed at the lower end of the potential range. As you can see, the minimum requirement is much lower than the feasible supply. So if we move to the next slide. So the problem is not the total quantity, but I think it's about how we distribute the feasible supply equitably, right? Because the fundamental challenges are posed by the ever-growing needs of high-income countries and the equitable distribution of the feasible supply of steel and cement. So as shown in this slide, current per capita material stocks in high-income countries actually exceed the feasible stock levels derived from the 1.5 or 2 degree budget. But as you can see, low-income countries have material stocks well below the feasible stock levels. But as indicated in the dashed line, it is possible to meet basic human needs across the world population with the feasible stock levels derived from the 1.5 or 2 degree carbon budget. So I think the primary challenge will be how to balance the ever-growing needs of high-income countries and also need to distribute the feasible supply equitably. So next slide, please. So the equitable distribution is actually quite a crucial issue in this domain because, as you can see, it is a global north that has a valuable outer mines that can be recycled into the future, but that's not the case for the global south, right? Where actually future demand will grow substantially. And so we really need equity-focused mechanisms to ensure a just energy and resource transition to ensure all the population can have a good life within the limited supply. So that was the last challenge, which was international inequality. So in the next slide, I'm going to just have a summary slide. But yeah, this is just a summary slide. But in summary, we have to address three main challenges in decarbonizing the steel and cement industries. And the first is to reduce the demand to match the limited supply, where I think resource efficiency or material efficiency would help, obviously. And actually, we already have a bunch of evidence on how to do this. So in the next slide, I'm going to just briefly explain some examples. But for example, there's an important opportunity to almost halve the use of materials in the building frame through optimized design or reducing over design. And material loss during construction can be reduced by improving the architectural and engineering specifications, or simply just addressing lack of client interest sometimes. Or simply building can just last longer through changing consumer behaviors. And there's also evidence that a large portion of end-of-life building components can be reused without melting down if just we will have the will to do so, And so in the next slide, so this is a case of the manufacturing sector, but we can just simply design small cars instead of SUVs, and then use small cars with ride sharing to reduce the total number of cars needed. And we also have a bunch of other strategies to reduce material demand, but still providing the same level of services like shelter, mobility, and communication, and so on and so forth. So according to the existing evidence we collected, the construction and manufacturing industries can actually provide the same level of services with significantly less material use. So what is needed is actually a balanced discussion to encourage action in these domains, rather than just solely waiting for large-scale infrastructure to emerge in the future and to solve all the problems away. So that's the kind of important sort of implication that I'm trying to provide to the governments and in the industries with this study. So next slide, please. So that was the first challenge, and the second is to expand high quality zero emission supply, where I think investment in infrastructure will be needed, but also upcycling will be quite required. So we actually have a lot of options to address this challenge. So as you can see in the next slide, for example, we can just disassemble parts more carefully and then implement better shredding or sorting to enable upcycling of scrap. Or alternatively, we can just develop new chemical extraction processes, or say, increase tolerance in the production of steel products. Or we can simply just reduce the amount of impurity in the product design in the first place, just changing the design phase so that we can recycle more at the end of life. So we have a lot of active research in this space. So I think what we have to do is to recognize the importance and to scale up the activity of upcycling, because when we talk about the decarbonization of infrastructure, decarbonization of industry, we are always talking about developing a new production technologies. But the upcycling is more about the collaboration effort by the the product designers, scrap collectors, and so on and so forth. So I think this is quite an important area that needs to be emphasized in the national or global agenda when it comes to industry decarbonization. And so that was the second challenge. In the next slide, I think finally and most importantly, there is the issue of the equitable access, I think, which has been largely overlooked. So next slide, please. So this is this is just a bunch of policies that has been that are currently being discussed. But if you look at the policies that are currently being discussed, we see that many of them are aimed at expanding supply or reducing demand, but are unlikely to contribute to the equitable access. So as you can see, obviously we have a lot of active discussion on a number of policy options to address challenges 1 or 2, which are expanding supply and reducing demand, but very few of them consider the equitable distribution of limited supply so that we can satisfy the basic needs across the global population. So I think I'm going to start a new research project on the equity issue in resource use, where I'm trying to sort of think about how equitable our economy is at the moment in terms of the resource use, and how we can change that situation in an effective and responsible manner. So yeah, if you're interested, I'd be more than happy to discuss the potential collaboration with you later or at any time. So that's it. Thank you for the attention.
Okay, thanks, Takuma. Thanks for your enlightening presentation. We are now opening the floor for the Q&A section. Please, if our audience have questions, please type your questions in our Q&A box. So I have a quick question. In your model, I can see that there are many products in your model. Yeah. You mentioned that the downcycling is very important. So I wondered, how do you deal with the downcycling? In that, does each product have a downcycling parameter, or they share the same downcycling parameter?
So I don't know how to put the word, but so technically in the model, we have sort of various types of scrap that we can collect, and each types of scrap have a different level of contamination, which can essentially determine what kind of product we can produce from that recycling based materials. And so yeah, I just assume this end of life scrap generated from this particular product have this level of contamination, so we can just produce these materials from these types of scrap. So that's how we did in the modeling approach. I don't know, what was that the question from you? So yeah, and so sorry, what was your question?
I just wonder, there are many different products in your model. Mm-hmm. When they after the recycling, and then the downcycling. Mm-hmm. The downcycling parameter in your model is the same value, or they have different values for each of the product?
Oh yeah, different values.
The steel, for example, the steel in the building, the steel in the infrastructure, the steel in the roads, they share the same value?
Not the same value, just for construction and transportation, just 4 or 5 categories. And then we have different sort of standards for each steel product, which is like 15 or 20 products to to determine which products we can produce from this particular scrap. Yeah, so that's how I did in the model.
Okay. In your slides, you mentioned that your methods is different with the IEA. So what the main difference is with the scenarios published by other international organizations, including IEA? Yeah.
Yeah, I think main differences is so we are not determining the demand fast. Most of the modeling studies, including the IEA, sort of assumes the demand will grow into the future, and then within the carbon budget, say carbon neutrality by 2050, and that's how they did. And because of that, their scenarios usually have growing demand, and then sort of growing requirements for geological carbon storage or green hydrogen or renewable electricity, quite a massive amount. In contrast, I think our scenarios determine the supply first and then think about how to adapt on the demand side. So we have quite a limited amount of supply compared to the most of the existing sort of scenarios, and we have also a bit of a linear sort of increase in the geological carbon storage and sort of renewable electricity. So it's more like a precautionary approach where we assume technological innovation will not really happen at the scale we need. So what we are going to do about it, that's the kind of basic narrative, and that's, I think, the main differences between the existing scenarios and our scenarios.
Okay, thanks, Takuma.
Cool.
Thanks for joining us tonight. Oh, have a good day.
Cool.
Thanks,
Okay.
thanks again. Okay, bye-bye. Okay, let's move on. Welcome to our next speaker. I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker, Professor Cao Zhi, and he is assumed in the position of the full professor at Nankai University in China. Prior his position at Nankai, he served as a tenure-track assistant professor at the Faculty of Applied Energy Engineering, University of Antwerp. He is probably interested in sustainability and industrial ecology, with a particular interest in developing and applying state-of-the-art sustainability assessment tools to examine the techno-economic feasibility of implementing low-carbon technologies or policy options. He is a mathematical model enthusiast with years of training in industrial ecology tools and beyond. And today he will share with us about decarbonizing concrete, decarbonization pathways for cement on concrete cycle. Okay, let's welcome Professor Cao.
Thank you so much for your kind introduction. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna get started. Thank you so much for having me here. And today I'm gonna share with you some of my recent research, recent progress of my research, and of course part of the work was done during my time at Northwestern. And over the past years, together with several collaborators, we have been working intensively, or we have been working together toward an integrated modeling framework to explore decarbonization opportunities for bulk material cycles, particularly cement and concrete. So first of all, I would like to emphasize the importance of bulk materials. So why bulk materials are important? This is because massive amounts of bulk materials have been used to support the functioning of our society. And the recent study, a recent global study published in Nature points out that in the year 2020, all human-made mass has exceeded all living biomass on this planet. So in other words, everything we built and everything we paved is now heavier than everything produced by the nature on this planet. So this quantification gives us a symbolic indication that we have entered, the epoch of Anthropocene. And as we can see from the figure here, a big fraction of the human-made mass comes from construction materials, such as cement and concrete. And these construction materials are ubiquitous in our society because they are easy to make, easy to work with, and easy to maintain. But the manufacturing process of these materials requires lots of energy, therefore has been identified as one of the largest contributors to global climate change, as mentioned by Takuma. And another important fact is that our demand for this construction material or these bulk materials has grown rapidly over the past 4 decades. And if these trends continues as it is very likely that we won't be able to meet any climate change goals. So this begs the question, how do we utilize material stocks or material stored in our society, and how do we improve material efficiency to help tackle climate change? But why do we need material efficiency? This is because many existing decarbonization roadmaps count on expensive production side strategies, which are not necessarily accepted by material producers, as emphasized by the last speaker, Takuma. And I would like to introduce the basic tenet of material efficiency. So the basic tenet of material efficiency is to reduce the society's demand for materials, thereby reducing environmental impacts arising from material production and material use, preferably without compromising human well-being. And so in the following slides, I will use the cement concrete cycle to demonstrate to what extent material efficiency strategies can help us tackle climate change and how stock dynamics will shape the mitigation landscape. So first of all, why cement and concrete matter? A quick answer is because cement and concrete are key ingredients to our civilization. Therefore, the massive production of cement and concrete has contributed a lot to the global CO2 emissions. In 2014, cement production alone has contributed about 7 to 8% to the global energy-related CO2 emissions. And cement production efficiency has progressed over the past decades, primarily coming from thermal efficiency improvement and fuel switching. And recent climate ambitions have called for achieving net zero emission by mid-century, which requires, as you can see, radical technology interventions. However, population growth, as indicated in the graph here, and also associated built environment needs will make cement concrete decarbonization more challenging. So this is why many existing, decarbonization roadmaps envision that the cement industry is going to deploy lots of CCAs, which implies that CCA's capacity has to increase by 13 times in 10 years and by 30 times in the next 20 years. Apparently, counting on CCAs is high risk. So in our recent work, we seek out alternative strategies to open up option space for decarbonizing the cement concrete cycle. We start from those strategies that target the production stage. For example, we could reduce CO2 emission by retrofitting cement kiln and incorporating more low carbon fuels, such as biomass. We could adopt new cement chemistry or new cement formulas to reduce the process emissions and thermal energy requirements. We could also replace ordinary Portland cement clinker with supplementary cementitious materials, which have similar property to the former. And we could also incorporate CO2 into concrete manufacturing or use industrial alkaline materials to mineralize CO2, thereby reducing the carbon footprint of concrete products. And all these measures are promising, but there are also many options that can help us reduce our demand or our use of cement concrete, and therefore the CO2 emissions associated with cement and concrete. For example, we could reduce material use through better material design, material substitution, and better construction practices. We could also reduce our demand for cement concrete through better architectural design or adopting more durable products. And another group of option is to utilizing end-of-life materials, such as recycling for new concrete or reusing building components. But here, of course, we will be needing circular design to make component reuse possible. So to what extent these demand-side strategies can contribute to CO2 emission mitigation? And to test out the effect of all these decarbonization levers, we developed an integrated modeling framework to first explore technological opportunities in cement and concrete cycle. And we also limit our scope to 3 countries, United States, China, India, so we can ensure that the conclusions arrived from our analysis are generalizable to other countries or regions. We developed 2 deep decarbonization pathways, a production-centric one and the whole system one. And the production-centric scenario focuses on decarbonization levers from the production side, while the whole system scenario includes decarbonization levers from the production side. And on top of the two deep decarbonization scenarios, we constructed two scenarios as references. The first reference scenario is frozen progress, and second one is current ambitions. So the frozen progress scenario assumes that production CO2 intensity for cement and concrete will remain, unchanged, which is counterfactual. And the second scenario, current ambitions, reflect the current ambitions of the industries and the policymakers. And and as you can see, the technology progress is moderate. And also due to the longevity of buildings and the roads, cement and concrete will stay for decades or more than decades in building stocks and road stocks. So a number of our levers have far-reaching, impacts over time on cement and concrete demand. So we developed a stock flow model to physically keep track of the temporal dynamics of material demand and end-of-life material availability. And these nuances allows us to capture all the details entailed by those decarbonization levers. And on top of this, our stock flow model is also able to distinguish different types of buildings and roads. So we're able to project newly constructed floor area and newly constructed road length by sector, therefore cement and concrete demand by sector. But for better presentation, I aggregate the result into fewer categories. Here, I would like to highlight that the magnitude and trends of cement and concrete demand is the joint effect of each country's population size, per capita floor area, per capita road length, lifetimes of building and roads, architecture and road design traditions, and also importantly, the historical development of building stocks and road stocks. Another important highlight is that the trajectory of cement concrete demand will shape the overall trend of CO2 emissions, which will be observed from the following slides. In addition to this granularity, our model also allows us to look into both CO2 released and stored over the life cycle of cement concrete. So here I would like to highlight a few groups of CO2 fluxes. The first group of CO2 fluxes is related to biogenic fuels and CCAs, which is called BECCS. And the second group of CO2 fluxes is related to CCU, or carbon utilization, which enables or enhances CO2 storage in the cement-based products or industrial waste that contain alkaline minerals. And the third group of CO2 fluxes is the natural weathering of cement-based products. As we know, over the lifespan of cement-based products, CO2 can slowly react with calcium silicates in the cement and concrete products, therefore be stored in cement and concrete products permanently. And we call this phenomenon cement carbonation. And the last important group of CO2 fluxes represents an alternative route of using biomass to remove CO2, and that is replacing concrete by mass timber. And adoption of mass timber in buildings will enlarge the carbon pool in buildings, as you can see in the following scenario result slides. And having this level of granularity in our model will allow us to distinguish CO2 emissions and CO2 uptake from different sources. But for better presentation, I will use the balance of positive and negative CO2 fluxes to present our scenario results. And in order to present the contribution of each decarbonization lever, I will use a weight approach to visualizing our scenario results. So in the following slides, we will use the results of frozen scenario as a benchmark. And in addition, we will use bar charts to visualize the cumulative contribution of each decarbonization lever from 2018 to 2060. So we can have a better sense of how large each decarbonization lever is contributing to climate change mitigation. As you can see, in the production-centric scenario, those decarbonization levers which were utilized in the current ambition scenario will be turned up to a more aggressive level, plus additional contribution from lower carbon cement chemistries and CO2 utilization. So level 2 and level 5. So what we can read from the graph here is that we will be able to achieve net zero through a production-centric decarbonization pathway, and most likely the cement concrete industry has to rely heavily on CCAs. Now, if we switch to a whole system pathway where CCAs and lower carbon cement chemistry are less relied on, instead, material efficiency and circular economy strategies are more relied on, we will also be able to, achieve net zero by 2060. Essentially, these demand side levers could give us a wide range of mitigation space and release our pressing, reliance for deploying CCAs in the cement and concrete production. And the cross-country comparison shown here gives us, another key message that the lifetime extension will start to play a pronounced role in China and India after around 2040. But for United States, the effect of lifetime extension is rather small because the lifespan of United States buildings is rather longer, which makes the lifetime extension much effective. And the results also show that while the whole system pathway could open up more CO2 reduction opportunity space, this pathway will require, engagement with a broader community of stakeholders. With that, I'd like to, summarize my, study into a few key findings. First, if we want to model the cement concrete demand and the contribution of each mitigation lever more accurately, we need to consider a wide range of factors, including population, living standard, building codes, regulations, construction traditions, material selection, lifetime of building and roads, and importantly, stock development. And second key message is deep decarbonization of the cement concrete cycle is possible with existing technologies and those currently in the innovation pipeline. And if we go with the production-focused, production-centric pathway, we will heavily rely on keen technology improvement, low carbon cement chemistry, clinker substitution, and CCAs. But if we go with the whole system approach, we can reduce pressure on production side solution through material efficiency, but this will require, engagement with stakeholders along the supply chain. With that, I'd like to conclude my presentation today. And before I wrap up presentation, I would like to say thank you to, all my co-authors. Thank you for attention. I also would like to happy to take a few questions, if any. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Professor Cao. Thanks for enlightening presentation. If you have any questions, please type your questions in the Q&A box. I have a question. As we know that you are a famous scholar who studies cement, and we also see that many scholars are focusing on investigate the emission reduction potential of the cement. And one of the pathways of the emission reduction is to replace cement with the wood. And in some articles, we can see that the substitution rate even reaches more than 90%. Do you think this setting is reasonable?
I think really depends if we are. First of all, thank you so much for for your question. So I think I have to clarify that. I think in the study you mentioned, I think you are talking about a individual building, which with which is possible to to implement 90% timber. But if we are talking about a whole building sector, like within a country, I think it's not possible because we simply don't have enough supply, to replace all concrete with timber. This is due to the limits of forest growth and also, due to the stringent regulations on, harvesting forest or harvesting wood product from forests. But also, I would like to clarify that in our model, we did consider replacing concrete product with timber, but we didn't but we also limit the applicability of timber to a few categories of buildings. For example, for those low-rise residential buildings, we assume that these buildings already, especially in rural areas, we assume that these buildings don't have the potential to work with timber because these buildings are already built. Really a large fraction of these buildings is already built with timber. So we assume that this building don't have a large potential to work with mass timber. And also we for those high-rise or mid-rise or high-rise buildings, we assume that only a certain fraction or certain proportion of the concrete is replaced by timber because for some components of a single building, you cannot use mass timber. For example, the foundation, you have to use cement concrete to build in foundation. So with all these technical details, we make our assumption for the implementation of mass timber. I hope I answered your question.
Okay, thanks. So do you think the potential for emission reduction brought by the technological development in cement industries will be large in the future? This is especially is that true when compared with the potential to reduce emissions from the energy transition and resources efficiency improvement?
Wait, so I don't think I get your question. So your question about do I think the technology progress in the production side is large enough to tackle climate change or to achieve net zero?
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
Especially when it's past compared with the energy transition and the resource efficiency improvement.
I think first of all, I have to break down your question into a few smaller questions. So regarding technology progress, so when we are talking about technology progress in the cement sector or cement concrete sector, we are basically talking about improving the electrical efficiency or thermal efficiency or better production efficiency, overall production efficiency, right? So I think there is large potential to improve the thermal efficiency or electrical efficiency, but I think the improvement here cannot enable the cement and concrete industry to transition toward carbon neutrality. This is simply because the thermal efficiency improvement or electrical efficiency improvement, all of these measures have limits. And this is why, a lot of recent cement and concrete decarbonization roadmaps envision that we will have to, count on CCAs if we don't improve, the motor efficiency of the whole cement concrete cycle. And as I indicated in one of the first slides, the CCA's capacity has to increase by 13 times or 30 times, in really a short time frame. And this has also been highlighted, in Takuma's slides. I think this is a common issue, for lots of for a wide range of bulk material sectors. But on the other side, even we don't have, even the improvement in the production side cannot help us achieve carbon neutrality. But I still think if we broaden the option space. We open up this option space to include downstream measures, to include demand side measures. We can definitely make this cement concrete sector carbon neutral. So when I'm talking about the demand side levers, I mean we could count on improving the material efficiency or reusing more end-of-life materials. I think all these measures has been highlighted in my presentation, also being highlighted in Takuma's presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Professor Cao again, and thanks for joining us tonight. So, let's see in Xiamen in December.
All right, thank you so much for having me here, and also thank you for all the speakers. I really learned a lot, and thank you for organizing this great event. And thank you, Professor Wei-Qiang Chen, for chairing this session. Thank you.
Thank you. As we reach the end of our conference, I want to take a moment to express my sincerest gratitude to all of our speakers and participants and our volunteers. And we have converted a lot of ground and many fascinating ideas have been shared and explored in our conference. So see you in our next conference. Thank you.